Hello and welcome to another video. This is Todd of Figure Fiend. This video is going to be a continuation of the previous video that was getting back to drawing. This is a part 2. This is going to cover my experience at going through the process of basically training myself to draw again, and then how I was enabled to reach a point where I felt comfortable doing packaging illustrations for toy packages. Specifically horror in these examples, and for anybody who didn't watch that video previously, definitely jump back because it'll make more sense of what you see here. And what I did include in this next bit is a quick summary. So what I did, I started by inking over top of existing artist drawings that were set super light. I did this for several weeks. It was just to build up some brush control and really to give me a better sense of like being able to move through working the material. And then I moved on to inking full pages. And once I did that and felt comfortable there, I could then move on to doing some color work on those inked pages, for examples. And that just, made me more familiar with the materials of the programs like Procreate, working on an iPad. But then I went back and I took some Udemy drawing classes just to get back to bare bones skills for drawing characters, drawing hands, drawing limbs, doing foreshortening, all of that sort of stuff. Just a couple weeks of training there, doing a couple hours here and there at night. And then once I had that training, I was able to go in and do some rendering on the iPad, still lifes, just to try to get close to as much as possible within the confines of my own style. Once I did that, I then moved through a series of paintings based on the classic monsters. As you can see, I did all 6. I stuck to using very simple tools to do this. I used Procreate, I used the iPad, I used the brush pen. I didn't erase anything. I used a single layer. I only worked monochromatically to get my accuracy and speed up and control at using that program, and to limit the features so that I'm not getting lost in the weeds trying out different stuff. It was basically just to do my best at making these pieces look like the characters, the actors that were in these roles. And this is how I worked. I put a photo to the right, and then I painted and drew to the left. And so over time, I would do, like, let's say this is evening, I would spend that evening rendering out, looking at the photo, continuing rendering highlight and shadow, and then do some tweaks the next day. Once I was comfortable, then I would move into coloring it. And I would spend an evening coloring it, and then the following evening, I would do another painting pass over top of that and paint it again. And then I would paint it again. So, and this taught me control of using the colors, making the characters pop from the backgrounds, applying highlights and shadows. And the best thing apart was, like, I could then apply this to each of the other characters from the 6 that I did. I could paint Frankenstein in color and concentrate on skin, and then repaint it again the next night. This time in a looser style, and then repaint it to more modern style. I think this was like my attempt at sort of early to mid 90s. And I found that when doing this, once I hit some of the later stuff like this mummy here, I wanted to control where the paint went. And because I'm painting over top, I tried to pay attention to the placement of the eyes, nose, and mouth specifically. Where in the earlier stuff, like those creatures that I just showed a moment ago, I didn't. I just painted right over top of them. Those placement areas moved around a little bit. And then when it came to doing something like this Dracula, I thought, well, I'm just going to try to do one color piece. I'm just going to try to focus on that. I'll pick a specific palette. Rather than paint 3 or 4 different color variants, I just want to make one that I'm comfortable with, I'm happy with in the end. And that seemed to work better because I was being more careful with placement. And then when it came to doing something like this Christopher Lee mummy, I concentrated a lot more time on the foundational underpainting in the grayscale, and then doing the color work over top of it was a pretty low impact exercise. And the same goes for London After Midnight. Concentrating on the features and then adding color over top of that, but being careful where I placed it. Now, this Carnival of Souls was cool because there are no high-res images of this, so I was able to do an underpainting and then paint a color version over top of that, which then resulted in a nice large-scale piece. These other pieces, like the Lovecraft, the fly, and even this next piece, which is me doing Christopher Lee. This is me working without an underpainting, without doing the grayscale monochromatic, and they are less successful. And one of the things about working this way is that in the other method, you always have a monochromatic grayscale to work from and reference, and doing it in this style, you don't. So I went back to doing the monochromatic stuff and painting that underpainting first to get accuracy and form and silhouette detail, all of that stuff. And that serves as a better base to paint over versus just, for me personally, just layering color. And so some of the stuff I didn't even finish, like this priest, but the skull, I spent more time on the rendering, on the focal details and that sort of thing, because I wanted a strong underpainting. Now, one thing, my friend and I, around this time, we decided we wanted to do an action figure. This is my childhood friend. I've talked about in other videos. We've been friends since 3rd grade, collecting, buying, all kinds of stuff. So we wanted to do Salem's Lot as the first thing that we wanted to do. And I've mentioned that in other videos. But so now that I'd done some drawing again, I was able to do a control drawing, which is essentially just a view drawing. And once I had that, we could look at that together and determine that's the way we wanted to go. We had somebody else sculpt this. And then we had another print service print this, which was Shapeways at the time, which he did a great job sculpting. They did a great job printing. But the cost of printing this was kind of absurd. It was like over $100 just to get 2. And they're 3 3/4. They're not large. So based on that, my friend and I, we bought printers and then decided to just print ourselves. And this is the piece count for the first test. It worked. It articulated. It had more modern articulation, you know, like moving joints and, you know, moving elbows. But same time, you know, I'll get back to that later. But for now, I needed create some packaging for us. So I did these early grayscale paintings of Barlow. And then I decided I had too much room around and I needed to focus on the face. So that's what I did. And from focusing on the face, I could go ahead and just paint over the color that was needed. And then I could go ahead and do a test it, doing some card art stuff. And early on, I hadn't done much card art in regard to stuff like this. So I was working in black and white mainly to get the layout, and then I'd add color later. And, you know, to speak on the larger figure, we found the material too brittle. So it became something where we use these small scale versions that are 2 inches and work from that. And that proved to be way better. We could crank those pieces out and just make many at a time and then get them painted up. And they were really cool and really fun. It's like a 2-inch half-size version. So it was evident that we needed some more images to sell these different versions of Barlow. So I wanted to do a number of paintings that could be used as backgrounds for the cards themselves. And they were small cards, so the paintings are on the loose side, but once they're brought down in size, they tighten up. So they were fast, they were rapid. And as you can see, I used the base underlay painting and then just did color overlays. And these are the final paintings. They're only like 3 or 4 inch cards, so the figures are very small, the images are really small. And then it was like, well, it would be good to have another vampire, so I did a control drawing for a Nosferatu, which would represent another thing. I also did a color study based on that control drawing, and that was like figuring out what sort of colors worked well. Not all these got used, but that's the way of generating this stuff. As you can see, it's the same process of making a bunch of small 2-inch figures, painting them out. That one, you can see, did follow the color concept. But then you can see how I didn't have any Nosferatu paintings done in the previous thing. So I did start a number of paintings. This would have been my overlay over top of the color version or the monochromatic. And then I wanted to do a more frontal one. I love the Gogos Burning Eye creature, Nosferatu. So I did a pass on that as well. But then I decided, well, it should look more classic, more standard. So went back and repainted that again to get more of like the rat-like aspect and the black bulging eyes. And then trying to figure out how to best apply those to the cards. And I'm showing the figures mainly so you can see the context of like what this is for, how it gets utilized. And this is the early card stuff. A lot of stuff still changes. As you can see, like a lot of the fonts changed. And then we did do some glow ones as well, just to play around with new glow materials, new glow paints, which was fun. And then One thing I found really interesting is like, because I'd done those paintings, I was able to do a clean sort of like rack version of those and then place those on new coffin carts. So those are basically just me doing ink work over top of the previous painting. So I was able to use that. And even for the skull, we decided that the rack stuff did really well. It shows when we traveled, so it would be cool to do death as well. So I took that painting and then I did some clean line work over top of that, since I already had a foundation, and was able to do some fast color layer over top of it, and just use that as well. And then it came to the, well, we should add other color characters. In this devil painting, I focused on being smoother and cleaner because my style is generally very sketchy. And with this guy, I wanted it to be cleaner, smoother, just a better quality execution, and hold up better when blown up. And I was pretty satisfied with the end result. He placed it really well on the cards, regardless of scale, and read really well, even monochromatically and in color. And this represented the first time that we would do a larger packaging. So I was able to blow that up for this 8-inch style figure, because we took the 2-inch figure and made an 8-inch, which we were pretty satisfied with. And the last character added was this zombie. And I started by working at doing some sketches on placement of the zombie, and then trying to like repaint over top of that in a cleaner, smoother way. This one was a different beast to do versus the others. I did do a number of color variants on that, and even this final one I'm more happy with, just changing the warmth and tones of the background to play around the cool of the face. But in the end, I think it was working from the sculpt that I did. It was one of the first things I sculpted that made it difficult to make a really nice piece in the end. When, you know, it came to moving over into something else, this Dracula image came in handy when I'd gotten my hands on Amigo Dracula that did not have a card, and I wanted to card him and display him. So I thought, hey, I've already got a Dracula painting. I've already got a Dracula painting that's in color. So I was able to use that to make this card, which came out in a way, and I was very excited about it because I wanted to be more old school, vintage, use the fonts from the poster, pay homage to like Remco stuff, and even the movie posters from that time period. And once I did those, once I did the Dracula, I decided, well, I've got some other pieces, like this Carnival of Souls piece. So I went ahead and sculpted that figure out, and then I was able to use the paintings that I had already done previously to make the card art. And I wanted to do Dorian Gray. I didn't have a painting, so I did this specifically once I'd started on the figure. And I was very happy to do the colors based on this and just get some sort of more vibrancy out of the piece overall. And even going back to the werewolf stuff that I'd shown earlier, I'm like, this is great, because I would love to do Curse of the Werewolf. They'd never done one, and I would love to do the zombie priest as well. So I was able to use both of those paintings, and that one didn't have a color, so I did do a color version of that specifically for this card package. And afterwards, you know, John and I from Monolith, we thought it would be really cool to do some Remco style stuff in the Remco boxes. And we had some heads from the previous stuff that we had been making in a 2-inch scale and even the 8-inch scale. So I'm like, this is perfect. So we can take the body. I've got some experience, he does as well, making Mego customs. So I took the original paintings, as you can see here, that were done previously, some of them specific for products, some of them just me painting already and practicing. And it was nice because there were, you know, many paintings to work from, and we try to go more like public domain in the way, like Devil and Death and Nosferatu and stuff like that. So I did a pass on Remco styling all those paintings by painting in the background, by framing it, and then taking some of the heads that we had, repurposing them on Mego bodies with new features and clothing and strong articulated glow bodies in an 8-inch scale. And translating that worked really well. And, you know, I had the paintings then, so it was great because then we could at least place the paintings on the products like these boxes and capture that mood that was in the original Remco stuff. So it made it a really fun, one of the best projects he and I worked on together, which is, you know, it was really satisfying to do. And I love being able to paint something that went onto that style box. After that, even more recent time, I wanted to do some pre-code horror style figures, and I had this mummy. So I thought, well, I'm going to ink my own mummy pieces. Really simple, clean line art that I could then do color treatments on to make a series of mummy figures to bring to Mask Fest that is going to be very pre-code horror aesthetic. So that's what you see now. It's basically me taking the inked piece and then adding color and working that in for each one of these, and then setting them up with color in the background. And that's when I did work in a layer system where I have an ink layer and then I have an under layer that represents color. And each one of these is hand colored. I could do them very quickly because the difficult part is the ink layer. And then I could then translate those onto cards to try to get it as EC as possible in some of the early ones. And even like this card right now, this predates EC. It's like 40s. And then translating that for a glow version as well. And I had a great time. This was like one of the most fun things that I did, was to ink these pieces and color them and then place them on cards that felt more reminiscent of the early pre-code horror stuff. And it was a lot of fun to do. So I appreciate you guys watching. This is definitely one of the longer videos I've made, but it was really enjoyable, and I appreciate the support and questions people had, and even like sharing their own experiences. So feel free to do that. Ask whatever questions you have. I'll try to get back to everyone. And thanks again.